If there is one driver that has kept us entertained throughout the summer break, that has to be Daniel Ricciardo. However, the reasons that he became famous on the grid weren't of good nature, as he's been linked with exiting the McLaren team at the end of the 2022 season when the situation between Alpine and Piastri has evolved the way it did. Now, these rumours turned out to be the truth and sadly the reality for Ricciardo, and although he is the only side that can break the contract with McLaren, it seems like he's given up the fight and will depart from the team at the end of the 2022 season. But what's next for Daniel? What are his possibilities? And is it truly possible that we won't see the Honey Badger for one full year in 2023 after the recent talk between him and Perez during the drivers' parade at the Dutch GP? Stick around with us to find out more. Now, Daniel Ricciardo joined McLaren F1 in 2021 with high hopes for the team. After all, he was a 7-time race winner and just came out of the P5 season in 2020 with Renault and a couple of podiums with the French team. Therefore, many of us were caught by surprise when Ricciardo announced that he'll leave Renault after it seemed like he made it work with the Enstone-based team. On the other hand, McLaren just finished P3 on the Constructors' Championship with Sainz and Norris and were on a high foot going into the next season, but Sainz also opted to leave the team for Ferrari. Ricciardo was signed under a lucrative deal with the team, and it was only natural for us and anybody else to expect top-notch performances from the Aussie. However, 2021 was kind of a disappointing year for the Aussie, and although he scored the first win for the team after a 10-year drought, leading Norris in the way of completing the first 1-2 finish after quite some time for McLaren, it still wasn't enough, simply because Ricciardo's rest of the season was truly underperforming. 2022 wasn't anything better, in fact it was much worse compared to the 2021 season. With just 7 races to go, Ricciardo has scored just 19 points for the team, which is highly disappointing, and it's truly a shame for a guy that earns around $50 million per year. True, the car is struggling a bit, and according to James Key and Lando Norris, it does have some difficulties when it comes to driving and performing, but 19 points is truly something that makes you think whether you deserve a seat in one of the top teams on the grid. With that being said, McLaren has opted out of another possibility, which is another younger Aussie named Oscar Piastri. The 21-year-old won the F2 Championship in 2021 and is an F3 winner. But all of that was sponsored and backed up by Alpine. Piastri was their reserve driver in 2022, but he wanted much more than that, and when it became evident that the French team were using him as a bargaining chip in order to negotiate a better deal with Alonso, it backfired on them and they lost both of their assets. Now that Ricciardo will be replaced by Oscar Piastri, the question has to be asked, what's next for the 8-time race winner? During the drivers' parade at the Dutch GP, Ricciardo was heard saying to Perez that he'll take a year off and come back in 2024. This was also speculated by many reports and many F1 experts who believe that Ricciardo doesn't have a chance of going into another team that would be willing to offer him around $15 million a year, which he's destined to make in 2023 even if he doesn't sit in an F1 car due to the buyout clauses with McLaren. But let's say that Ricciardo doesn't want to sit out the 2023 season and wants to drive. What are his options? First, he could go back to Alpine. After all, they do have a successful history with each other, and Ricciardo was the podium bearer for the team after quite a long time. Remember that Cyril Abiteboul, the previous Renault team principal, had to get a tattoo due to the bet he had with Ricciardo that if the Aussie was to score a podium, he'll get to put some permanent art on his body. Ricciardo does understand how the Alpine car performs, and he would be reunited again with Ocon, his teammate from Renault. One of the main reasons why Ricciardo wasn't able to perform at a high level with McLaren is because his driving style is very specific, and he seems to enjoy cars that are more stable on the braking and exiting of the corners. This wasn't the case with McLaren, and that affected his self-confidence and his ability to steer the car successfully, which eventually cost him a lot of lap time. But Alpine, formerly known as Renault, are reportedly looking in another direction, as they're negotiating a deal with a much younger driver, Pierre Gasly. He's a Frenchman, just like the team, which will be a dream coming true for Gasly, according to Helmut Marko. Although Gasly is still under contract with AlphaTauri for the 2023 season, if all the requirements are met for the Italian team, they would be glad to let Gasly go. These requirements are reportedly including the signing of Colton Herta, who is currently driving the IndyCar 500 and is waiting for an FIA exemption for earning his super license. Therefore, that door would be closed for Ricciardo, but that isn't the only team he can go to. Ricciardo was rumoured to go to Haas, replacing Mick Schumacher. it became evident that Mick's relationship with both the team and Ferrari's management has reached a boiling point and that Mick won't be part of the Ferrari Academy from 2023. So that means that the team will look elsewhere for another driver, and although they will give Antonio Giovinazzi some driving time in Monza and Austin on free practice sessions, possibly preparing for an F1 spot, it's likely that they'll try and pursue Ricciardo too. Steiner has contacted Ricciardo on multiple occasions during the summer break, but has said in an interview that they need to be really careful when approaching Danny since he didn't leave McLaren without a reason and maybe they don't want him. Giovinazzi is a reserve driver in Ferrari, and although he didn't glorify himself in Alfa Romeo in 2021, his last season in F1, he'll be now more motivated than ever to prove that he is made of F1 material. What better team to do so than Haas? On top of that, Ricciardo would have to take a massive pay cut to join the Haas team, since they won't be able to pay nearly the same amount of money that he'll receive from the buyout clause. True, he may have the status of #1 driver if he proves himself to be better than Magnussen, who continued the deal for 2023, and if he does that, he'll have a bigger say when it comes to car development and setups. But it's up to the team to choose whether he'll join them or not, as we're sure that Ricciardo will consider Haas as a team to join if he doesn't want to sit out the 2023 season. The last place that could possibly be given to him is in Williams. However, we're not 100% sure that Ricciardo would want to be a backmarker in every race, as we aren't sure how good Williams will be from the 2023 season and beyond either. It's highly unlikely that they'll make good progress, enough to make Ricciardo consider their seat, so if it's not for the teams that we spoke about earlier, we're seeing the last of Ricciardo in 2022. So, what do you think will happen with the Aussie? Do you think that he'll sit out the 2023 season just to have another shot in 2024? Let us know in the comments below.